What if your entire life could change, in a moment so quiet, no one even noticed it was happening? In the next few minutes, you'll uncover a story that begins with a simple cup of coffee, but unfolds into a life-altering twist involving a billionaire, a bold act of courage, and a decision that shocked everyone. This isn't just another feel-good story. It's the kind that stays with you. If you believe powerful moments deserve to be told, hit subscribe and support us in bringing more stories like this to life. Lina Morales didn't know that her entire life would change before the hour struck 10. If someone had told her that morning, while she was tying the faded green apron behind her back, while the scent of burnt toast clung to the air like a stubborn ghost, that before noon she would lose her job and be offered another worth 6 figures by a man the world simultaneously revered and resented, she would have laughed. Or cried. Or both. But this was San Francisco, a city built on reinvention. A city where earthquakes and opportunity shared the same street corner. And sometimes, destiny walked through the door without knocking. It was 6:04 a.m. when Lina turned the key to unlock the front door of Coastal Grounds Café. The morning fog rolled in off the bay, wrapping the sidewalks in a silver haze, muffling the buzz of the waking city. Everything felt slower in those early hours, like the world hadn't quite decided what kind of day it would be. Inside, the café was cold, silent, still asleep. She walked past the empty tables, the old clock ticking softly above the espresso machine, and headed to the back to start the prep routine. Bagels into the toaster, coffee grinders rumbling to life, pastries lined up behind the glass display like little promises of warmth. Lina had done this hundreds of times. For years. 6 days a week. Not one sick day. She was the kind of employee small business owners prayed for, efficient, invisible, endlessly reliable. But she wasn't doing it for glory. She was doing it because rent didn't pay itself, and her father's medication came first. At 27, she wasn't where she thought she'd be. Journalism school was just a memory now, the unfinished degree buried beneath credit card statements and late-night panic. Somewhere between her second waitressing job and the third eviction notice, she'd stopped asking, what if, and started focusing on, what now? That morning, something felt different. Not in any obvious way, no storm clouds, no omens, but deep in her chest, a tightness, like the air was holding its breath. By 7:30 a.m., the regulars started trickling in. Dock workers from the pier ordered their black coffee with a grunt and a nod. Mrs. Greenwood, as always, took the corner booth with the cushion she brought from home. The café came alive slowly, like a song warming up. But the feeling didn't go away. That strange electricity in Lina's ribs stayed with her. Then came 9:37 a.m. The door chimed. A man stepped in, shoulders hunched, hoodie pulled low, moving like someone who didn't want to be seen. Lina barely glanced up at first, until she did. And then the air really did stop. She froze, coffee pot mid-air. There, standing a few feet from the pastry case, was Ethan Cole. The Ethan Cole. The billionaire behind Novacor. The youngest CEO in tech history. The man who built an empire with code, charisma, and controversy. And the same man currently being devoured by every media outlet in America. He had once been Silicon Valley's golden boy. His software powered half the devices in every home, school, and hospital across the country. But now he was the villain. A product failure, a scandal, an angry shareholder tweet, and suddenly the empire had cracks. Headlines questioned his leadership. Former partners called him dangerous. Protesters stood outside his offices. And yet here he was, in a dingy cafe near Fisherman's Wharf, clutching a laptop bag and looking like he hadn't slept in days. Lina's mind scrambled. She thought about calling her manager. About offering him the VIP seat, except there was no VIP seat. This wasn't that kind of place. And maybe, just maybe, he'd come here precisely because of that. So she did something that surprised even herself. She grabbed a menu and walked over, pretending he was no one special. "Morning," she said, like she hadn't just recognized him. "Sit wherever you like. Can I get you started with something to drink?" He looked up at her. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, not that she was anyone famous, but that she was treating him like he was no one at all. And for some reason, that seemed to relax him. "Coffee. Black," he said. "And maybe, somewhere quiet." Lena nodded. "Corner booth's your best bet. That one doesn't get much sunlight this time of day." He gave a grateful nod and made his way over. She watched him as she poured the coffee, noticing how his hands trembled slightly when he reached for the cup. There was a weariness to him that couldn't be explained by sleep deprivation alone. He looked like someone on the verge of unraveling. She walked back over and placed the mug gently in front of him. "Let me know if you need anything else." He smiled. "Barely. Thanks." Then he pulled out his laptop, opened it, and disappeared behind the screen like a man trying to shrink his presence from the world. The cafe had quieted again. No one else seemed to notice him, yet. But Lena had a sinking feeling that was going to change fast. And she was right. At 9:49 a.m., a college student named Alex sat down at the table near the window. His eyes went wide as he glanced toward the corner booth. His phone slid out of his pocket like a reflex. A second later, his friend did the same. Lena acted before she could think. She stepped in front of them with a practiced, polite voice. "Sorry, guys. He's here for some privacy." Alex blinked. "You serious? That's Ethan freaking Cole. Do you know what a photo of this is worth?" "Not more than someone's right to drink their coffee in peace," she said. "Please put the phone away." They grumbled, but obeyed. She turned toward the counter, heart hammering. She wasn't sure why she'd done it. It wasn't her business. And it sure as hell wasn't safe to confront customers. But there was something in Ethan's face, something broken, that made her feel like she had to. He hadn't looked up. But somehow, she knew he'd heard. At 9:53 a.m., Bradley, the cafe manager, emerged from the back. Bradley had the energy of someone who thought he'd one day be famous for a reality show that never got made. He had a talent for self-promotion and a sixth sense for spotting PR moments. And Ethan Cole in his cafe? That was a jackpot. He reached for his phone and mouthed to Lena, "Get a picture." She shook her head. "No." "What?" he whispered. "He doesn't want attention." "Exactly," Bradley grinned. "Which makes it even better. Mystery billionaire in disguise. It's perfect. This post could blow us up." "I'm not doing that," Lena said. "It's not right." Bradley's face twisted. "You don't get to decide what's right. You're a waitress." She felt the words like a slap. "I'm also a person," she replied softly. "And so is he." That was the moment. The split in the road. The tiny decision that didn't feel tiny at all. And in the next few minutes, the decision would cost her everything. Bradley's eyes were locked on his phone screen, thumbs tapping furiously as he paced behind the espresso machine, framing the perfect caption for the photo he was about to take. Something clever, something viral. When billionaires trade boardrooms for black coffee, maybe. Even tech titans need caffeine. He could already taste the attention. Across the room, Lena stood frozen, watching it all unfold like a slow-motion train crash. Ethan Cole still sat quietly in the corner booth, sipping from his cup, eyes focused on the laptop screen in front of him. He hadn't said a word. Hadn't asked for help. But Lena could feel it in her bones, he was hanging by a thread. She didn't know his whole story, didn't need to. The weight on his shoulders was clear in the way he hunched over the keyboard, the way he flinched slightly at each new buzz from a phone nearby. Bradley raised his camera. Lena stepped directly into his path. "Don't," she said. He blinked. Excuse me. Don't take that photo. Bradley laughed, more out of disbelief than amusement. You can't be serious. He's not here for that, she said calmly. You saw how he came in. He's exhausted, he's hiding. He's not looking for an audience. Bradley's eyes narrowed. This isn't about what he's looking for. This is about what this cafe needs. Exposure. Attention. He could blow us up overnight. You think this dump is gonna make it through another quarter on loyalty cards and hash browns? One picture, Lena. One. She shook her head. I'm not going to let you exploit him. His voice dropped. Let me. Now he was getting angry. The air changed. You don't get to make those decisions. You're not the owner. You're not even a supervisor. You pour coffee and clear plates. Lena's jaw clenched. She wanted to walk away. She wanted to say it wasn't worth it. But there was a line in her mind, thin, barely visible, but unmistakable. She'd spent years stepping around it, avoiding conflict, biting her tongue. But not today. I serve people, she said. And today that means protecting someone who didn't ask for attention. Bradley scoffed. Protecting someone? He's a billionaire. He doesn't need protection. He's fine. She shook her head. You don't know that. A long silence fell between them, broken only by the hiss of steamed milk and the chatter of oblivious customers across the room. Then, suddenly, Bradley's face went cold. He turned his back, muttered something under his breath, and disappeared into the office. Lena felt her stomach drop. She knew what that meant. 5 minutes later, he was back, without the phone, without the smirk. You're done, he said, voice clipped. Lena blinked. What? You're fired. Take your stuff and get out. Effective immediately. The words fell like bricks. Hard, final. The cafe stilled. Even the low jazz from the speakers seemed to falter. Mrs. Greenwood turned around in her seat, brows furrowed. The couple near the door paused mid-bite. A young barista at the register froze with a tray of croissants in her hands. You're firing me? Lena asked, her voice quiet. Bradley folded his arms. Yes. You undermined me in front of customers. You disrespected my authority. This isn't some social justice rally, Lena, it's a business. If you can't understand that, you don't belong here. Lena didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat tightened. After 4 years, no warnings, no complaints, this? Go, he said. Now. She felt her hands move before her mind caught up, reaching for the apron string, untying the knot, slipping the fabric over her head. She walked slowly to the back, toward the break room, her steps heavy. The world was spinning. She was trying to breathe but couldn't catch it. Her fingertips were numb. This wasn't just a job. It was rent. Food. Her dad's prescriptions. It was the only stable thing she had in a life that constantly threatened to fall apart. And it was over. She reached for her tote bag, slung it over her shoulder, and turned to walk back out. That's when she heard the chair scrape. A voice followed, low and deliberate, cutting clean through the tension like a scalpel. Is there a problem here? The room snapped toward the sound. Ethan Cole was standing. Bradley immediately changed. His posture straightened. His voice softened, performative. Mr. Cole. No problem at all. Just a minor staff issue. Ethan's expression didn't change. He glanced once at Lena, then back at Bradley. I saw what happened, he said, voice firm. And that didn't look minor. Bradley stammered, Sir, I assure you. This woman, Ethan interrupted, pointing toward Lena, was protecting my privacy. Something your establishment clearly has no regard for. Lena stood frozen by the coffee station, her heart pounding. She couldn't tell if she was embarrassed or grateful or somewhere in between. Ethan turned fully to her. "What's your name?" "Lena," she managed. "Lena Morales." He pulled his phone from his coat pocket and started typing. His fingers moved quickly, precisely. Then he looked up. "I'm between executive assistants. My last one just accepted a position overseas. I've been meaning to find someone new, someone sharp, intuitive, good under pressure." Lena stared, eyes wide. Her stomach dropped again, but this time from a completely different altitude. "Would you be interested in coming to work with me?" he asked. The cafe was silent. She blinked. "Are you serious?" "Completely." He turned the screen toward her. An email draft to HR, already half written with her name in it. Starting salaries $105,000. Full benefits. Relocation covered if you need it. You can say no, of course. But I watched how you handled everything this morning, and frankly, that's exactly the kind of person I want on my team. Bradley turned pale. The other employees watched, mouth slightly agape. Someone near the register whispered, "Is this real life?" Lena's hands trembled. She had no resume in her pocket. No idea what the job entailed. No clue how to even respond. But she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. I'd be honored." Ethan smiled. "Great. Someone from HR will contact you this afternoon. I'm flying back to headquarters tonight, but I'd like to get you started right away." He turned back to Bradley. His voice didn't rise, but his words were like a blade slipping between ribs. "And as for this cafe," he said, "I'll be sharing this story with my followers. You'll be hearing from a lot of people soon. Some of them might even be journalists." Bradley opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Ethan walked back to his booth, packed up his laptop, and with one last look at Lena, nodded. Then he slipped out the door into the foggy morning. Lena stood motionless, tote bag still on her shoulder, apron folded neatly in her hand. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel revenge. She felt like the world had turned inside out. She stepped outside a few minutes later, unsure of what would come next. But in the distance, somewhere between the drifting mist and the sound of seagulls crying overhead, something felt different. She wasn't the same. And neither was her life. Lena Morales woke the next morning to a silence so thick it almost felt fictional. No alarm. No clatter from the upstairs neighbor's kids. No buzz from the cafe group chat reminding her to cover someone's shift. Just silence, interrupted only by the quiet hum of her old fridge and the rhythmic tap of her heartbeat echoing in her ears. She hadn't slept much. After Ethan Cole left the cafe, the day had dissolved into a storm of disbelief. Her phone had blown up, texts from coworkers, voicemails from friends, even 2 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize. She ignored them all. She couldn't speak, not yet. She needed the noise outside to slow down before she could process the noise inside. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the chipped paint on the windowsill. A draft snuck in, but she didn't pull the blanket around her. She just breathed. Slow. Careful. On her nightstand, the screen of her phone lit up again. This time, it was a message. "Car will pick you up at 8 a.m. sharp. Welcome to the team. HR, Novacor." Below it, another notification had popped up, Ethan Cole had tweeted. She didn't follow him, but her friends had forwarded the link at least a dozen times. "Just witnessed an extraordinary act of integrity this morning. A young woman protected my privacy in a moment when it would have been easy to capitalize. I'm proud to welcome Lena Morales to the Novacor team. Good people still exist. Let's lift them up." The post had over 92,000 retweets. By the time she stepped out of her apartment, a sleek black car was already waiting. She walked toward it in a thrifted blazer 2 sizes too big, her hair pinned in a low twist that took 3 tries to tame. As she opened the door, her fingers shook on the handle. The driver greeted her by name. "Ms. Morales?" "Good morning." She blinked. "Morning." The ride downtown passed in silence. She watched San Francisco blur past, the same building she used to walk by on the way to the diner, now seen through tinted glass. Everything looked sharper. Cleaner. Like the edges of the world had been ironed while she slept. As the car pulled up to Novacor's headquarters, a towering steel and glass marvel tucked into the city's tech district, Lena felt her stomach knot. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was displacement. Like her life had been picked up, shaken out, and repacked in someone else's suitcase. Inside, a woman from HR met her in the lobby. "Lena. We've been expecting you. Follow me." The building pulsed with quiet purpose. People moved quickly but not frantically, greeting each other with nods and half-smiles. No one looked like they'd ever scrubbed syrup off a table at 6 a.m. The HR woman led her to a temporary desk for the day, minimalist, modern, facing a skyline Lena had only ever seen from ground level. "Mr. Cole will meet with you this afternoon," the woman said. "Today is mostly onboarding, paperwork, tech setup, and orientation with your team." Team. The word didn't feel real. She wanted to laugh. Or run. Or throw up. Instead, she nodded and sat down. The day passed in a blur of signatures, logins, keycards, and tours. Everyone she met was kind, efficient, and oddly curious. It was clear most had read the tweet. They looked at her like she was a new character on a show they'd been watching for years. When Ethan finally arrived at her desk around 3 p.m., he looked rested. Centered. Different from the man at the café. "You made it," he said. "I think so," she replied, not quite sure if she was joking. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, pulling a chair beside her. "It wasn't just that you protected my space. It was how you did it, unshaken, respectful, certain. That kind of discernment is rare." She smiled, trying to push back the flood of emotions building in her throat. He leaned in slightly. "I know this is a jump. I know it's sudden. But I've trusted my gut my whole career, and it's never screamed this loudly. You belong here, Lena." She nodded. She wanted to believe him. Later that evening, back in her apartment, Lena collapsed on her mattress fully clothed. She stared at the ceiling, her inbox buzzing in the background. She hadn't cried all day. But now she did. Not because she was sad. Not even because she was overwhelmed. But because for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. The next morning, she returned to Novacor. A real badge. A real title, Executive Communications Associate. Her office, yes, office, had a small window, a standing desk, and a welcome basket with her name on it. It included a handwritten note from Ethan. "Your story is already inspiring others. Let's build something bigger together. EC." She spent that first week shadowing his assistant, learning how to manage internal memos, media briefings, team updates, and private correspondence. She found herself obsessing over every sentence she wrote, every word choice. This wasn't pouring coffee. This was being the voice of a billion-dollar brand. She read every file she was given twice. Then again. Each night, she returned home physically intact but emotionally raw. It wasn't just the hours, it was the reinvention. She was shedding an old identity with every passing day, and it left her unsure of what was left underneath. At the end of week 2, Ethan asked her to write the internal memo for Novacor's upcoming employee town hall. It was a test. She knew it. She stayed late, rewrote it 4 times, and submitted it at 11:57 p.m. At 7 a.m., she got a reply. Perfect. You have the job. For real. No probation. Let's do this. EC. She stared at the screen. Then stared at it again. Then cried, again. That day, HR delivered her full benefits packet, company card, and a new title, Executive Communications Lead. 2 days later, a LinkedIn message came from an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years. Saw the tweet. That's wild. You always were the realest person I knew. Guess the world finally caught up. That night, Lena called her father. She told him everything. He didn't say much, just listened. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time before he said, I always knew you'd get out of that cafe. But this? This is something else. A pause. I'm proud of you, Mija. She closed her eyes and let the words soak in like sunlight after a storm. On Monday, as she rode the elevator up to the executive floor, wearing a blazer that actually fit and shoes that didn't pinch, Lena stared at her reflection in the mirrored wall. She didn't look rich. She didn't look different. But she no longer looked like she didn't belong. The elevator doors opened. She stepped forward. By her 3rd month at Novacor, Lena Morales had memorized the floor plan of the company's towering headquarters as intimately as she once knew the cracks in the cafe's countertop. She could tell you which conference room had the best lighting for video calls, which printer jammed more often than it should, and which team lead brought in the best leftovers to share. It wasn't the building she was adapting to, it was herself. Every morning, she passed through the gleaming lobby that had once made her feel like an intruder. And each time, the feeling that she didn't belong had begun to dissolve, not because she was trying to fit in, but because she was finally allowing herself to take up space. But success, she quickly learned, was not an elevator ride. It wasn't clean or simple or even celebratory all the time. It was awkward. Messy. Humbling. Some days, she felt like a rising star. Other days, like a fraud waiting to be exposed. Her official title now was Executive Communications Lead, and it came with more responsibility than she could have imagined when she first stepped into Ethan Cole's orbit. She handled internal messaging, supported crisis communications, drafted speeches, and sometimes, when no one else knew what to say, she gave Ethan the words that helped lead a company of nearly 10,000 employees. She worked long hours, often staying past sunset. But unlike the endless shifts at the cafe, this work didn't drain her, it sharpened her. It stretched her. Still, the gap between where she came from and where she was now sometimes felt too wide to bridge. It came to a head on a Tuesday morning during a routine strategy meeting. She had prepared talking points for Ethan's keynote address at a tech leadership summit. The whole room was filled with vice presidents and senior advisors, people with decades of experience, Ivy League degrees, pedigrees Lena had only ever read about in profiles or magazine bios. As she read through her outline, a comment from across the table stopped her mid-sentence. Sorry, but this feels soft, one of the senior comms directors said. It reads like a diary entry, not a strategy. You might want to scale back the emotional stuff. There were murmurs of agreement. Lena glanced at Ethan, who didn't intervene. Not yet. She swallowed the sting and nodded. Thank you. I'll review it again. She made it through the rest of the meeting without breaking. But in the privacy of her office afterward, she shut the door, sank into her chair, and let the air leave her lungs like a deflated balloon. She hadn't realized how much of herself she'd poured into those pages. She wasn't just crafting a speech. She was trying to help Ethan reconnect with the human beings who made his company function. She believed in language that moved people, not just instructed them. But maybe she was still too service industry for this world. Maybe empathy wasn't boardroom currency. A soft knock pulled her out of the spiral. Ethan stepped inside without waiting. I should have said something, he began. It's fine, Lena said quickly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. They were right to push back. No, he said. They were wrong to dismiss what they didn't understand. She didn't respond, unsure of how to interpret the look in his eyes, part apology, part something else she couldn't name. I read your version again, he said, placing the printed pages on her desk. And it's exactly what I need to say. Not because it's safe. Because it's true. Lena met his gaze. You're sure? I built NovaCore with my brain, he said. But we're still standing because of people who gave this company their heart. You get that? They need to hear it. From that day forward, something shifted. Ethan began giving Lena more visibility, not out of charity, but out of genuine belief in her instincts. He brought her into high-level meetings, gave her a seat at panels, even asked her to co-host an internal podcast series highlighting voices from within the company. They called it Humans of NovaCore. It wasn't flashy, but it was real, stories from janitors, data analysts, front-end developers, even cafeteria staff. Lena interviewed each one with reverence, drawing out quiet truths about resilience, identity, and the beauty of building something that mattered. The series became an unexpected hit. Employees wrote in from across the country, saying it made them feel seen, heard, respected. One email from a longtime facilities worker read, I've worked here 17 years. No one ever asked me how I got here. Until now. Ethan forwarded it to Lena with one line, this is the culture you're shaping. But Lena didn't just stop there. With Ethan's blessing, she launched a side project under NovaCore's community impact arm, an initiative called Grounded. Its goal was simple, spotlight service workers from all walks of life through short-form documentaries, blogs, and monthly microgrants. The first subject? A waitress in Phoenix who took night classes in engineering. The second? A former line cook who now taught math in public schools. The stories spread quickly. Media outlets began to take notice. Lena was invited to speak at 2 leadership conferences. She almost declined, then thought about her younger self, the one who wiped counters and prayed for tips just to make rent. She stood on stage in front of hundreds, hands shaking slightly, and said, leadership isn't a title. It's a decision. And sometimes, the person who shows up for you when no one else does, the person who tells you no when the world is saying yes, is the leader you'll remember for the rest of your life. After the speech, a young woman in the audience approached her, eyes filled with emotion. My mom works 2 jobs, she said. She always says no one sees her. But you did. You see all of us. Lena thanked her, heart thudding with something between awe and grief. She'd come so far, but the people she carried with her had shaped every step. Back in San Francisco, the work never slowed, but Lena found her rhythm. She learned when to speak up and when to listen. When to push and when to pause. She wasn't trying to prove herself anymore. She was just trying to be useful, honest, human. Some nights, she stayed late in the office, the lights low, the city below flickering like a pulse. She kept a framed photo of her father on her desk, taken years before his health declined. In it, he's smiling next to an old pickup truck, holding a lunchbox she'd once tried to decorate with sharpest stars. Whenever she felt overwhelmed, she'd look at it and remember what he used to tell her, you don't have to shine like everyone else. Just glow where you are. One Friday evening, as she wrapped up a memo for Ethan's next town hall, he knocked on her office door. You ready to lead your first team? He asked. She looked up. Wait, what? I want you to build out a new branch of the comms department, he said. Internal culture and storytelling. Call it whatever you want. But make it yours. Her mouth opened, closed. Are you sure I'm ready? Ethan smiled. I'm not hiring the girl from the café anymore, Lena. I'm promoting the woman who's already changed how this company sees itself. That night, she walked home instead of taking the car service. She needed the air, the rhythm of her old neighborhood, the grounding scent of sea salt and sidewalk. When she passed the spot where Coastal Grounds Café used to sit, a for lease sign now in the window, she stopped. There was no gloating in her heart, only a quiet ache. She didn't want revenge on the past. She only wanted to honor the people still living in it. She pulled out her phone and drafted a message she wasn't sure she'd ever post. To the ones still waiting tables, cleaning floors, holding back tears in the middle of a shift, you are worthy. You are seen. And your story isn't small. She didn't press send. Not yet. Some words needed to sit a little longer. Because even now, even here, Lena was still learning how to glow. A full year had passed, but Lena Morales still reached for her apron some mornings before remembering she no longer needed it. The reflex lived in her bones, tucked into muscle memory like an old habit that hadn't yet caught up to her new life. The apartment was different now, sleek, sunlit, modern, but there were still pieces of her old world scattered throughout. A chipped mug from Coastal Grounds Café sat next to a French press on her marble kitchen counter. An old post-it note with her dad's handwriting remained pinned to her fridge. Character is what you do when no one is watching. Some things, she'd decided, were worth carrying forward. It was just after sunrise when she stood in front of the tall glass windows of her new office, watching the first light creep over the city. From the 29th floor of Novacor's global headquarters, San Francisco looked smaller, less overwhelming, almost delicate. But Lena had never been more aware of the people below. She knew what it felt like to move through that city as someone unseen. She was no longer just part of the company. She had become its heartbeat. The department she built, called Human Pulse, now spanned 5 cities. Its mission was simple: put people back at the center of how Novacor told its story. Employees, customers, communities. The voices that were too often left out of the innovation narrative. Under her leadership, they had launched employee storytelling campaigns, diversity spotlight programs, and a new mentorship pipeline aimed specifically at lifting those from non-traditional backgrounds. The podcast she once co-hosted from a tiny recording room had become a quarterly live event, streamed across campuses, celebrated for its vulnerability and clarity. People often told her she was changing the culture of the company. But Lena always corrected them. I'm just helping it become more honest, she'd say. That morning, she was preparing to give the keynote at Novacor's annual summit. It would be the first time in company history that someone from her department, not a CEO, not a founder, would open the event. And Ethan had insisted it be her. The speech sat folded in her hand, written in her own words, not filtered by PR or softened by approval rounds. It told the story of service, of silence, of second chances. Before stepping into the main auditorium, Lena stood in front of the mirror in the executive washroom, adjusting the delicate gold pin on her blazer, a gift from her father before he passed, a symbol of the sun. She touched it gently, breathed in. Outside, hundreds of employees waited. Cameras were rolling. Media outlets stood ready. The world, it seemed, was still watching. When she took the stage, she didn't smile right away. She looked out over the crowd and let the silence speak first. She wanted them to feel what she felt, that before the applause, before the titles, there was simply the decision to show up. I wasn't supposed to be here, she began. I don't say that out of false humility. I say it because for a long time, I believed it. I served coffee. I wiped tables. I studied people more than I studied books because that was all I had time for. But one morning, I chose something very simple, to protect a stranger's privacy, even if it cost me everything. I didn't know that decision would open a door. I only knew I had to live with the kind of person I was when no one else was watching. She paused, eyes flicking to the front row where Ethan sat, hands clasped. I stand here now, not as a symbol of luck, but as a reminder. Integrity is not flashy. It doesn't trend. It doesn't make headlines until someone decides it's rare enough to notice. But it is powerful. And it lives inside everyone who has ever chosen kindness when no one clapped for it. The room was quiet. Some took notes. Some just watched. I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm here to remind you that the people building this company, coding the apps, answering the customer calls, cleaning these floors, they are not supporting characters. They are the story. When the speech ended, there wasn't thunderous applause. There was a quiet kind of reverence. People stood slowly, not because they were told to, but because they understood what they had just heard. The truth had a way of disarming people. Lena didn't need fanfare. She needed them to remember. After the summit, she returned to her office and found a note waiting on her desk. Your voice made us remember who we are. Thank you for being our compass. Ethan. Later that afternoon, Lena took a walk through her old neighborhood. She passed the street corner where she used to wait for the early bus, the corner market where she once debated whether she could afford milk that week. It was quieter now, like the past was gently bowing as she passed. When she turned the corner and saw the building where Coastal Grounds Café once stood, she stopped in place. It looked different. A new sign hung over the door, marigolds. Inside, a young woman behind the counter laughed with a customer. There were plants in the windows, bright yellow tiles on the walls, and, most strikingly, a sign that read, Everyone deserves a moment of peace. Lena stepped inside, heart thudding. She didn't introduce herself. Didn't say she once worked in this exact space, that her life changed just a few feet from where the register now stood. She just ordered a coffee and found a seat by the window. The girl who brought it to her was maybe 22, eyes full of fire and fatigue. Thank you, Lena said, locking eyes with her. Of course, the girl replied. You look familiar. Lena smiled. I just have one of those faces. She sat for a long time, sipping her coffee slowly, watching the flow of customers, the rhythm of a place that had once been her world. It no longer felt like home, but it also no longer felt like loss. It simply was a chapter, and she had turned the page. Back at her apartment that night, Lena finally opened her phone and pulled up a tweet she had written months ago but never sent. She read it again. To every worker wondering if it's worth it to do the right thing, it is. Not because someone's watching, but because it makes you someone worth being. She hit post. The tweet caught fire. Messages flooded in, baristas, janitors, freelancers, teachers, retail clerks. Strangers who had never heard of Novacore but who saw themselves in Lena's words. That night, as she lay in bed, Lena Morales thought about the girl she used to be. The one who once cried in the break room with an apron balled up in her hands, terrified of what came next. That girl hadn't known what she would become. But this woman? This woman was still her. Just louder. Braver. Still grounded, but no longer small. And somewhere in the darkness, a new day was beginning again. There are stories we hear, stories we forget, and then there are stories that leave a mark so deep they become a mirror, reflecting not only who we are, but who we could be. Lena Morales' story is one of those. It didn't begin in the spotlight. There were no grand gestures, no applause, no flashing lights. It started in the soft, gray quiet of a San Francisco morning, in a worn-down cafe where coffee was poured with care, and dignity lived in small, almost invisible moments. Lena was not born into privilege. She didn't grow up with connections or opportunity handed to her. Raised by a single father with calloused hands and a gentle heart, Lena learned early on that survival was its own kind of courage. For years, she worked long hours behind a counter, memorizing the nuances of tired customers and cracked porcelain mugs. Her dreams of writing and storytelling faded into the background, buried beneath the urgency of bills and responsibilities. Life wasn't unfair. It was just relentless. But Lena had something else, something that doesn't shimmer on paper or show up in resumes. She had integrity. And on one seemingly ordinary morning, when a worn and weary Ethan Cole, a billionaire hunted by headlines and hiding from the world, walked into her café hoping not to be noticed, Lena noticed everything. Not his fame. Not his fortune. But his fatigue. His vulnerability. His need to be treated like a human being instead of a headline. She didn't ask for a selfie. She didn't post him on social media. She didn't try to use him as a ticket to escape the life she was living. Instead, she stood between him and the world. She said no when it would have been easier to say yes. She chose respect over recognition. And that decision, simple, quiet, deeply human, changed everything. When her manager tried to turn that moment into marketing, Lena refused. When she was told to obey, to stay small, she stood tall. Even when it cost her the job she relied on, she chose to protect someone who hadn't asked for protection, simply because she knew it was the right thing to do. And someone was watching. Ethan Cole, whose empire had been built on innovation but was crumbling from a lack of human connection, saw in Lena not just an act of kindness, but a rare kind of leadership. The kind that doesn't come from titles or corner offices. The kind that's instinctive. Uncompromising. True. In that cafe, in front of stunned customers and a furious boss, he offered her a new beginning, a job at Novacor. A role that would catapult her from the service counter to the executive floor. But this story was never about a job offer. It was about what happened after. Because Lena didn't change who she was when her circumstances changed. She carried the same empathy, the same grounded wisdom, into every meeting room, every speech, every late night spent shaping a new culture at Novacor. She didn't chase influence, she earned it. She didn't demand power, she embodied it. In a world that often tells us to be louder, flashier, hungrier, Lena became proof that consistency, compassion, and quiet integrity could take you just as far, if not further. Through hard work and authenticity, she built a department focused not on image, but on truth. She created programs that gave voice to the voiceless, amplified the untold stories of the workers behind the tech, and made her company see itself more clearly. She wasn't there to polish reputations. She was there to protect people. And still, she never forgot who she was. She returned to the places that had once felt like prison walls and saw them not with resentment, but with reverence. She didn't seek revenge on her past. She honored it. She thanked it. Because she knew that the same hands that wiped diner tables were now holding the mic at a global summit, not in spite of that history, but because of it. 1 year after that morning in the cafe, Lena stood on stage at Novacor's annual summit and reminded a crowd of thousands that integrity isn't something you wear, it's something you live. She reminded them that the greatest changes often begin in the smallest moments. And she reminded all of us that being good is not a weakness. It's a superpower. So what can we learn from Lena Morales? First and foremost, never underestimate the impact of one moment. We often believe that life's turning points come with neon signs or grand decisions. But sometimes, they show up dressed like ordinary days. A regular shift. A tired customer. A choice no one sees. But what you do in that moment, when there's no reward, no witness, no clear outcome, that's where your character is built. And sometimes, someone is watching after all. Second, protect your values like they are your currency. Because they are. In a world constantly pressuring us to compromise, to cut corners, to chase applause, people like Lena remind us that integrity is not just a moral compass, it's a foundation. It's what allows you to stand still when the world tries to move you. And ironically, it's what often moves you forward when the time is right. Third, don't wait until you feel ready. Lena didn't feel ready when Ethan offered her the job. She didn't feel ready when she led her first executive meeting or built her first team. But she showed up anyway. Growth doesn't come with a permission slip. Sometimes, you step into the unknown shaking, unsure, and a little terrified, and that's okay. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being faithful to the person you're becoming. And finally, remember where you came from, but don't let it chain you. Your past is a place to learn from, not live in. Lena never erased her years of struggle. She used them as fuel, as perspective, as truth. Her humility became her strength. Her history became her anchor. So if you're someone watching this right now who feels stuck, who's working shifts no one sees, who's giving their best in places where it feels like no one notices, you are not invisible. You are not small. You are building something. Every act of kindness. Every line of hard-earned honesty. Every moment you choose to be better than your circumstances, it matters. Lena's story is not just a fairy tale about being discovered. It's a testimony that sometimes, the world doesn't need you to shout. It just needs you to stand. And now, maybe more than ever, we need more Lenas. We need more people who lead with heart. Who speak with truth. Who protect what's right, even when it's inconvenient. Because when you live with integrity, you might not always get noticed immediately, but when you do, it's for all the right reasons. So keep going. Keep showing up. Keep choosing the version of yourself you'll be proud of 5 years from now. Your moment is coming. And when it does, it might look just like a regular day. So be ready. Because you're ready enough. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own power, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel to support stories that uplift the voices we don't hear enough of, people like Lena, and maybe even people like you. Your support gives us the fuel to create more content that shines a light on what really matters: character, courage, and the quiet choices that change lives. If you believe in the value of compassion, integrity, and real transformation, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep telling the stories that make us better. Together.